Okay, so welcome back, everybody, for a Desert Deep Dive. And today we are going to kind of wade into some pretty murky waters.
Yeah.
We were talking about hoaxes, and we are looking at a excerpt from a book that talks about why people actually spread hoaxes.
Right.
It's a really interesting question for me. It's always been something I thought about. Like, why do people fall for these things, when they seem so out there?
Well, it's more than just falling for them. It's why people share them.
Oh, right.
And so the book really argues that there is a deeper psychology at play here.
Yeah.
A perfect storm of cognitive quirks and social pressures that make us susceptible to these like fabricated narratives.
Okay, so it's not just, I saw something, I thought it was cool and shared it. There's more to it than that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the book talks about the power of a good story, and it mentions how.
Oh, hey there. What's up?
Yeah, hi, it's David. Yes, I just proposed this topic because I was about to spread a hoax, and I thought, oh my God, why we are so prone to spread hoaxes? And the news that I was about to spread was this one, which I think is quite believing, but it says like that. The European Union is considering to ban on wood-burning stoves as a measure to tackle climate change. After reading this news, I thought, oh my God, what the European Union is thinking about, that they are.
Hey, David, thanks for that story.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
It sounds super believable, right?
It hits on a lot of those key points we were discussing.
Right. Like, oh no, they're taking away our wood stoves.
Exactly. So what was your first instinct? Yep. Go on.
Yeah, my first instinct was just to say, oh my God, what these people that we are paying through taxes, they are doing in the European Union, that they're even thinking that we are not going to use these kind of things to keep warm yourself.
Right, so you had a pretty strong reaction right away.
It sounds like it triggered something in you.
Well, you almost shared it, right, David?
That's key. What stopped you?
Yeah, what was that moment of hesitation?
Because that's where the critical thinking comes in. Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
The thing is that later on, just in a more cold mind, I thought, well, I'm going to look for some information online. And then I just start watching some news. And they were saying that it was an hoax or some kind of, misunderstanding or something like that. False news, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so you took a moment to cool down and look into it.
You took a breath and investigated.
So you did the work to see if it was credible.
Which is great.
So it brings us back to the power of a good story.
Think back to cave paintings even.
Right, they weren't just for fun. Oh yeah, go on.
Yeah, but my question was why we are so prone to spread false news and hoaxes. Why we are so rapidly sharing this kind of news through the internet.
That's the million-dollar question, David.
And it's complex.
Let's unpack this.
The book argues it's a perfect storm of things.
Like, we're wired to love stories, right?
And our brains look for patterns.
And we also super social.
And those three things together are key here.
So it's not just about dumb people.
No, we're all susceptible.
So with your EU story,
yeah, you know what? I was about to phone my brother who just bought a stove who is working with pellets. I don't know if you know what I mean. It's kind of wood that you burn it to get hot, So I was about to call him and say, what have you done? You have bought something really, really wrong.
That's a great point, David.
you were ready to warn him,
It shows how quickly these things can spread.
especially within families and close circles.
Because you trust your brother.
You assume he hasn't been tricked either.
It's that social influence we were talking about.
So you sharing it validates the story, right?
Yeah, it becomes more believable just because you shared.
And like we said, it's not about intelligence
No, it's about how our minds work.
and how stories impact us.
So why were you so red? Oh, go for it.
So don't you think the problem is that we are so bombarded with so many news that, let's say, I don't know, 10% of them, they are really fake news. So what's the point in receiving so many news if some of them are really fake?
That's a really good question, David.
It's about the sheer volume.
Like, how do you even sort through it all?
When you are overwhelmed, you are less critical.
You kind of shut down.
Exactly. You start making assumptions.
And that's when hoaxes slip in, right?
Yes, they exploit that mental fatigue.
And the algorithm knows that too.
Which is why outrage gets amplified.
The angrier you are, the more you share.
Which is why it's so important to slow down.
But it's hard when there's so much.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
So the solution would be just stop watching news. Just stop reading newspapers and whatever it comes to my computer. Just look a blackout.
Well, it's tempting to just tune it all out, right?
You're not alone in feeling that way.
Like, just put our heads in the sand.
But is ignorance really bliss?
Because that EU stove story plays on assumptions.
Like you already suspected overreach from the EU.
Even if those thoughts aren't actually real.
So our brains can kind of trick us.
In a way, yeah, like an illusion.
So if someone believes a government is overreaching,
A hoax about banning stoves fits right in.
making it easy to believe and then share, right?
It's all connected in your mind.
You also had an emotional reaction, right?
This is also a big piece of this puzzle.
You had some outrage about the stoves,
And when we're emotional, we're not as critical.
just like clickbait headlines that get shared. Hey, yeah, what's up?
So what would be the problem to stop watching and listening to all the news that we receive every day?
That's a valid question, David.
It's understandable to feel overwhelmed.
But the book kind of implies that complete avoidance isn't the answer.
Because then you are susceptible to other things.
Right, you lose to.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Why it is not the answer? Just tell me the reason why it is not the answer.
Well, it's like the book implies your brain fills in gaps.
That's right. You may become even more susceptible.
Right, because you're not getting any new information.
And those assumptions go unchecked and unchallenged.
So back to our listener.
And what's the problem in not receiving any information? Tell me. I can breathe, I can eat, whatever. So I don't need any information at all. So what's the problem about that?
The problem is that those existing beliefs are still there.
Yeah, and they might not be accurate.
So a hoax that confirms them, it's that emotional response that hooks us.
And they can shut down our logic.
So you might share before you even think.
Before you even check if it's real.
Then there's that whole social influence piece.
That's a huge part of why hoaxes spread so fast. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but if I don't receive this information, if I don't listen to these hoaxes, I'm not affected and I'm not going to share them because I don't know them.
That makes sense on the surface, David.
But it's like creating an echo chamber.
The book talks about how stories shape our views.
So what is an alternative?
The way to stay... Oh, go for it.
You are talking all the time about a book. Which book are you talking about? There is no book.
Ah, good point, David.
Oh, no.
It's not that there is no book. It's that we haven't mentioned it.
Sorry about that, David. We should have.
We've been referencing the ideas from a book,
The book is called Propensión a difundir engaños.
which translates to propensity to spread hoaxes.
Our source is excerpts from that book.
We should have made that clear.
Thanks for calling us out on that.
Okay, so going back to not seeking information,
It is kind of about verifying before you share.
like, are you being critical? Oh, yeah, let's
Yeah,
hear it.
and what about if this book you are talking about, which I think is a little bit rubbish, what do you think if this book is a real hoax itself?
That's a really interesting question, David.
It is. How meta would that be?
Okay, so how do we know if this book is legit,
Well, we looked at the author's credentials.
right, and the publisher's reputation?
It went through an editorial process.
But it is hard to be aware in the moment.
That's where social influence comes in.
That's a huge part of why hoaxes spread so fast.
You tend to trust stories from people you know.
Like with your brother, right?
Humans are social. We need those connections. Yep. Go on.
Yeah. Can you tell me who is the author of this book, which I don't recognize at all, please?
Sure, David, the author is Helena Matute
She's a professor of psychology.
at the University of Deusto in Spain,
She's done a lot of research on reasoning,
and how we detect cause and effect.
which is super. Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
You just made up this author, aren't you? So you are spreading hoaxes yourself.
Okay, David, I get why you'd think that.
Yeah, you are putting us to the test here.
But no, Helena Matute is a real person.
And we can actually share some links. Oh, yeah. Go on.
Helena Matute, I don't know her.
That's fair, David. Not everyone knows every expert.
Yeah, it doesn't mean she's not credible.
We could drop.
After finishing this podcast, I'm going to investigate this Helena Matud you are talking about. If she is Spanish, which I have a great doubt about it, and all these hoaxes you are spreading about. Sorry about that.
Haha, well, we welcome your investigation, David.
Seriously, we love that you're checking it out.
Because that's exactly what we're advocating for here.
Okay, so is this book legit?
Well, we think so, and here's why.
So how can we be sure?
We always try to be transparent with our sources.
And if we make a mistake, we want to correct it.
It all comes back to you being critical.
Even with those links we were going to share later.
You still have to be critical of everything.
Like you said, this podcast could be a hoax.
Exactly. So, go for it.
Yeah, and you both could be a hoax yourself. Oh my God, this is so incredible.
Haha, that's the ultimate question, isn't it?
I love it, David. You're taking it to the next level.
Maybe we're pawns in a larger game, right?
Okay, so how do you investigate us then?
Well, you could start with our backgrounds.
And see if what we say lines up with our actions.
Are we consistent over time?
Do we walk the talk, so to speak?
Do we cite our sources properly?
And do we admit when we are wrong?
Those are all good indicators.
And it all comes back to trust, right?
But trust must be earned and verified.
Okay, so assuming we're not a hoax,
Let's look at those hoaxes in general.
you know, those things that spread so quickly,
And that can have such lasting impact.
like even after they are disproven, right?
Yeah. The damage is already done, yeah.
It seems like we're all vulnerable.
We all have our own biases, for sure.
So how do we fight back against hoaxes then?
How do we protect ourselves from misinformation?
The book says to know our own weak spots.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah. The first thing to avoid this misinformation is to avoid this kind of podcast, the one you are doing.
Haha, that's certainly one way to avoid it, David.
If the information is the problem, cut off the source.
But we talked earlier about echo chambers, right?
Is that a good long-term strategy for you, David?
The book implies that self-awareness is key.
So being self-aware is a good defense.
Like you questioning the stove story earlier.
Right, you actually checked before sharing.
That's a very valuable habit to have.
It really helps avoid spreading hoaxes.
So maybe the solution isn't total avoidance.
Maybe it's about being more critical of the info.
The book mentions slowing.
Hey, yeah. What's
Okay,
up?
now I'd like to ask you, in which hoax yourself has fall?
That's a great question, David.
Yeah, turn on the lens on ourselves.
Okay, so I'll go first.
It can be hard to admit, right?
It is, but I think it is important.
Okay.
I once shared a meme about a historical event.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it turned out to be totally fabricated.
What made you think it was real?
It fit my existing views of that time period. Uh-huh. Yeah, so I shared it without really checking
Confirmation bias at play.
big time. What about you?
I fell for a hoax about a scientific study.
Really?
It claimed that chocolate was a health food.
I wish that were true.
Me too. But I later found out this. Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
I'm sorry to say that chocolate is very healthy for your health. It's very good for your health. It's not a hoax at all.
Haha. Okay, David. So maybe that one wasn't a hoax.
Maybe I just wanted it to be true.
I get that.
So maybe I was a little too quick to judge.
I mean, there are studies that say dark chocolate is good.
In moderation, right?
Always in moderation.
But if I see a headline saying, eat all the chocolate.
I am sharing that everywhere.
So what have we learned?
That we want to believe what makes us feel good.
And we have to watch out for that.
Speaking of watching out, though,
What?
those chocolate studies can be tricky, right?
Like, who funded the research?
Exactly.
And what was their agenda?
Because if you think about it, we have to check the source,
It still goes back to that critical thinking.
even when it comes to chocolate.
Okay, so can you spot?
Oh, back to our listener.
Yeah, of
What's
course.
up?
Of course, the cocoa companies they pay for these studies. Of course, everybody knows about that except you. Of course.
You're right, David. That's a common criticism.
That funding definitely skews the results.
It's like, I want to believe it. You know,
Like I wanted that meme to be true, right?
and I wanted the chocolate study to be legit.
And you wanted your wood stove.
It all comes back to our own biases.
We have to know what we want to be true.
So we can be extra critical of that info.
Well, thanks for being here with us, David.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, before you go, which hoax would you like to appear one day in a newspaper? Just let's make a thought investigation about that.
That's a fun question, David.
A hoax we want to see. Interesting.
Okay, let me think.
This is tough.
I think it would be a hoax about world peace.
Oh, that's good.
Like all countries agree to disarm,
The impact would be amazing if people believed.
even for a little while, right?
What about you? What hoax do you want?
I'd want one about unlimited clean energy.
Oh, like a major breakthrough.
Yeah, scientists solve fusion power.
That would change everything.
Right. No more climate change worries.
Okay, so it is about our hopes.
That's a great point. Yeah.
It shows what we deeply care about.
And those are the stories we'd love to believe.
Okay, well, thanks for the thought exercise, David.
And for keeping us honest.
We really appreciate your perspective today.
We hope you found this helpful today, David.
And thanks again for keeping us on our toes.
We enjoy having you on the podcast, David.
Please go investigate Helena Matute and her work.
Or just enjoy some dark chocolate in moderation,
And remember to always double check before you share.
especially if it confirms something you already believe.
Thanks again for being such an engaged listener,
And feel free to share this podcast.
even though it might be a hoax.
Or maybe just a source of interesting questions.
We hope you had fun investigating with us.
Oh, go for it.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm not going to share this podcast with anybody. It is a completely hoax. So I'm sorry about that. I'm not going to share it with anyone.
Well, that's certainly your prerogative, David.
We understand if you feel that way.
We appreciate you sticking around to the end.
Maybe something we said was helpful, maybe not.
Ultimately, it's your decision.
But we hope you had fun thinking about hoaxes.
That's all we can really ask for, right?
So thanks for being with us today.
It was a pleasure talking with you about this topic.
Even if you don't agree with us, we appreciate you.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
We had a wonderful time on this episode.
I hope our listener did as well.
Even if you don't think this was the best show,
It's been a great show with you, David.
please go investigate Helen Matute and her work.
Or just enjoy some dark chocolate in moderation.
Or not. It is completely up to you, of course.
Just remember to think critically about everything.
We hope you continue to investigate the world around you.
And thanks again for being such an engaged listener.
We'll see you next time.
Goodbye, David, and thanks for listening today.
We hope that you will join us again next time.
And we hope you had some fun thinking about hoaxes.
We thank you so much for listening today.
It was such a joy to talk with you about this topic.
We loved your insights, David. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining our show today.
We had a great time on this episode with you.
It is my hope that our listener had fun too.
It was a pleasure having you investigate with us.
It's been a great show. Thank you again.
We really appreciate your perspective today.
We wish you well on your hoax detecting journey.
With that, we're signing off for today.
It's been great having you with us.
Thank you.